Welcome to Agrivisions, a program of First Dakota National Bank. I'm Nate Franzén, President of Ag Banking, and I'll be your host. Joining me today is Alan Hojer with our Keep Farmers Farming program.
Yeah, well, thanks, Nate. You know, primarily what I work in the areas of estate planning, transition type work, and really helping people get their operations organized in a productive manner. And yeah, that's where I spend my time.
How can a young person purchase land today with the capital required? Or you know, as we're working with that next generation, it's often the question we get. Matter of fact, in our emerging farmer program, I think every class we've had, at some point in the process, I get asked, Nate, how can I compete buying land or buying other farm assets with the older generation that has so much more equity and so much more financial horsepower? So it's on the young folks' minds often at that stage in their careers. Talk to us about how you've seen that and what it means to you and what can be done.
Yeah, interesting, because most people, I'm a first generation farmer, okay? My wife and I started with 10 cows and $25,000. That's our story. And we've deployed a lot of strategies to get to what it is today, and we're very proud of that. But number one, I tell people when they ask is, number one, don't look over the fence. What your neighbor has, you can't have it. It's not yours. You can't have that. And so you got to figure out who you are within the world of which you're going to farm and what you want your operation to be. And it better be a greater purpose. There has to be a vision there. Otherwise, why are you doing it? So that upfront part is critically important. Have a business plan. And by the way, don't expect to make a lot of money off it. You're always going to have some level of diversification to take care of the income side, the compensation side. Because as you're growing that business, it's going to consume all the cash you're going to make off that business as you're growing that business. It's just critical. And so you have to have the passion to do it, and you have to have really a purpose, and you have to have a bigger picture goal as to why you want to do it. Don't look over the fence. It'll drive you crazy. Don't look over the fence. It'll be an adventure. It'll be scary. And yes, I still believe people can do it today. And I'd love to coach people through that. Understand who you are and what you want to do, and then we'll figure out the best way to approach it. Very important. Can people buy land today? Sure. I don't have any problem with that. It was easier last year. But the point is, let's face it, you're going to need to have an older generation, I'm going to say right out of the gate, and we have to be willing to leverage some of our equity to help you get going. And the other thing you have going, younger people, is number one, you have time on your side, you have programs on your side. FSA has been a great resource. First Code has been a great resource to combine with FSA on some operations. But you need to have some of your own cash. You got to be willing to put some of your own cash together to take some of the bite out of this thing. Back to ownership interest and compensation are two different things. If you're building some individual wealth, now you're going to build some individual cash, and you decide what to do with it. It's just so important that we accomplish that right there. If we're doing that, there's things that'll open up because you've got your arms around some cash, and you need to do that. If you're depending on somebody else's equity, you're never going to develop the level of individual wealth that's going to put you in a position to buy that ground someday. We have to deal with both. The other part I'm going to throw in there, and I'm really, the more and more I'm involved with this, diversification. Yeah. We have to understand more about the impacts of diversification. I work off farm. We've always looked at it as a form of diversification. Sure. There's other forms of diversification, as I study some of the operations that are very, very successful, that they've deployed without even realizing the impact that diversification's had on the scope of that operation as it's growing. We need to spend time studying diversification and how it can open up opportunities they never thought about before. Yeah. It's a big deal, especially for a young farmer getting started. The talents and the skills they have that the market demands and could use is incredible. That's diversification. Yeah.
When I get asked that question in our beginning farmer program, I often say, step back and think of your competitive advantage. Yeah. You know, Dad's maybe not excited about calving out quite as many cows as he used to, right? Or whatever, you name it. Labor can be your advantage. Yeah. Maybe. Maybe you have maybe you're really tech savvy, and so you can bring some expertise to the operation around technology that brings another level of profitability to the operation. That's a competitive advantage. Find a way to leverage that advantage. The other thing I tell them, and I'm interested to get your reaction to this, Alan, because you're working with all generations in the process. I tell that younger generation, number one, whenever you're approaching transition talks with your families or your business, they don't owe you anything. So go into it with that mindset. You're not owed anything in this. You have to earn it.
Yeah.
And have that humble mindset, and you're going to have a much more productive process. But the other thing I will tell them is, if you go into it with that mindset and you really work at it for a reasonable period of time, and nothing's happening, and you're not getting any assurances of how this is going to work for you,
sure.
Only you know this, but don't be afraid to say, I can't do this anymore because I need more assurances. And where I come from in that mindset is, in many cases, they're married, they're starting a young family, they have to provide.
Yeah. And
providing for their family, back to your ownership versus equity, a promise of future equity from an estate plan doesn't buy diapers and doesn't give you the feeling that you're taking care of your family.
Right.
So there's got to really be that balance there. And I challenge young producers to say, if you've approached it the right way, you've had good conversations, and you're not getting the answers you need, at some point, you may have to step away. You may have to make a career-changing decision.
Yeah.
Hopefully not, but certainly that's the best decision at times.
Yeah.
How do you see that?
Yeah, and that's a tough crossroads right there. Again, I know that's why I get called in a lot of those operations, because of those complexities right there. And again, if the ownership interest and compensation is done correct, of which people are able to build individual wealth without having to have so much pressure on somebody else's equity, you'd be surprised how many of those thoughts kind of go away.
Yeah.
And that's a big part. So that's really a message I want to send, is we need to work on both of that. And don't assume that the parents or the grandparents know or think they're doing anything wrong. They just don't. Times have changed. Things have changed. And actually, most parents, grandparents really want to get it right.
Yeah,
remember,
for sure.
We're the ones running out of time.
Yep.
I'm a grandparent, a parent too. And so we need to get it right, because that's back to that legacy, finding success. They want you to be successful. And really how it came to them is what they know. It may not be what it's going to take to get it to the future. And so we got a lot of work to do out there, Nate. A lot of work to do.
You just made a really good point that, I've heard that older generation say before, I didn't have anything when I started, so Johnny's not going to have anything either. But he'll have the promise that someday I'll take care of him. Well, that may have been how it was once before, but with the capital required today to be a farming business, that promise of equity is not enough in most cases, right? So that's where this plan and this conversation is so critical, so important.
And yet there's no grandparent or parent out there that wants their children to go through, that I've met yet. I'm sure there's somebody that wants them to go through what they went through. They want it to be better for them. And if they say those things, and I've ran into it, it's not that they really mean that, they just don't know how. Yeah. And so how do we approach it in a way? Because if they don't find success, they'll feel like failure. Yeah. We have to find success, and we can.
Yeah.
Now, let's be clear here. Not all younger generations are handling themselves well, and not all older generations are handling themselves well. But in both cases, we can find a pathway forward, but sometimes you got to mediate some of that for a while. It's just a critical piece that we have to find. And people, well, I'll be honest too, not everybody should be in business together.
I was gonna bring that up.
Yeah, the personality piece, let's face it, if you can't count on the person to your left or the person to your right, is this really a good idea? Or if it's gone so far that we can't back up from the arguing that's happened, is this really a good idea? And maybe we have to approach this differently. Yeah. But overall, there's a lot of passionate people out there. Welcome to the pressure of legacy. There's a lot of passion out there that's not always bringing the best out of everybody.
Yeah.
But we have to get that level of respect and appreciation in place on both sides. And if we can get that in place, then we begin to find that pathway forward. And remember, don't look for perfect.
Yeah.
It'll cause
Yeah.
more imperfection.
Yeah, such great advice, and I tell you, Alan, I joked about you writing a book, but I also hope you do someday, because I'd be the first reader of that book. It's such important work that you're doing, and the passion you have behind it is really cool. And so as we wrap up our comments, Alan, give people an overview of the impact Keep Farmers Farming has had since we started it 9-10 years ago.
Yeah, we're in our 10th year right now. Interesting, and you got to remember, it was started with an idea. So I'm going to say the first year or so was really about developing process and getting things going. Since then we've worked with just over 200 operations in both the estate planning, transition, strategic planning, a lot of different areas. But we're leaving a mark out there. The calls we get from referrals, it seems like if people are getting into a jam, we're getting the call.
Yeah.
Which, that's fine. We'll work your way through it. I'm very proud of what we've accomplished. I really am. We kind of went into a venture. It was an idea, and I think many of our Ag Advisor group were going through some of the challenges, and thankful that they were willing to bring it to the leadership of First Dakota. And I do want to give First Dakota a big caveat here. They threw some guy out there that they didn't even know. They walked in the door after Snowstorm Sidarl and trusted a couple of us to go out and tackle this monster. That takes leadership in itself. And they let us do our thing. We come up with our processes, and we work with a lot of people. I really feel like we got this thing right, Nate. And of course, our challenge is how do we move forward and continue to grow the program and deal with the complexities. But no, very proud of where we're at today. I really truly believe we have the process in place. We can handle any size, and it's not all about large. Operations need help.
Yep.
Depending on whatever the size is, you have your level of complexities. It's a matter of figuring out how do we deal with those complexities to find success.
Yeah, that's another really proud thing for me to see, that we're helping operations of all sizes.
Yeah.
We've worked with some gigantic operations, but we've also worked with some of the smallest mom and pop operations out there, and everything in between. And everybody needs help and wants to get this part right.
Sure.
And we're here to help.
That's right. We're here to help.
Alan, thanks for what you do, and thanks for being with us on this Agrivisions podcast.
Thank you.
That's another First Dakota Agrivisions program.